The Territory Government's Working Futures policy has been in the spotlight this week after reports it's failing to achieve some basic goals. It's been over a year since the launch of the Working Futures policy aimed at improving the lives of Territorians in remote areas. The Coordinator General of Remote Services, Bob Beadman, is charged with monitoring progress on the initiative and last week released a report showing serious failings across a number of areas. He joined us in the studio earlier. Bob Beadman, welcome to Stateline.
Thank you, Laetitia.
You lament the fact that not one township lease has been signed in the last year, finalised in the last year. What's been the hold-up?
I suppose a complex of things. I don't know that governments have given it the necessary priority. I think there's been some distraction by getting leases for housing precincts so that the SIHIP program can roll out after the criticism about delays. I know that there's a lot of work going on leasing powerhouses or teachers' houses, leases of that kind, but they have tended to take the effort away from township leasing, which I would have thought was a more crucial issue.
How are those fundamental problems with land tenure impeding development in the growth towns?
At this stage, they're not impeding government rollout of infrastructure improvement, and there was a huge deficit to be overcome, and I think that's working fairly well. But the vision of both governments, federal and territory government, was to open up these towns to private sector investment. But without secure tenure underpinning a business enterprise in one of those growth towns, you're not going to raise venture capital from a bank, and consequently that private sector investment isn't happening.
And that happened in New.
In New, the problem is slightly different. The township lease and the subleases that have issued under it are so complex that one major bank has expressed a view that rather than creating an asset that's tradable in a real estate market, you've probably created a liability. And they doubt that any lender would lend against a sublease of the kind that's being generated under the New township lease.
Is that the only community with that problem?
No, there are township leases at Anuragu and Umbercumber on Groot Island, but they're complex too, and I think they might have been developed on the model that came out of New. Now, if you extend that model around the rest of the territory, you've absolutely defeated the purpose of governments of opening up these townships to private sector investment and normal business migration.
Is this concept then sunk before it's begun?
Unless governments turn around and do something differently in relation to township leases on the mainland, I believe that you're not going to develop territory growth towns in the way originally envisaged.
Your report shows government isn't moving in the right direction on school attendance. Why aren't school attendance programs working?
I wish I knew the answer. I wish every educator knew the answer. And what I had to say in my report was that government should try a range of new things. That if you keep on with the same measures over and over again, expecting a different result, then there's something wrong with you. I think I made that remark last week. So I've pointed out that the penalty in the territory is much lower than the other jurisdictions. Perhaps the territory should look at lifting that penalty and using that to spearhead a massive public relations campaign about it is compulsory to send your kids to school. My point is simply this, that if Aboriginal kids don't come out at the end of the school system equipped to take the well-remunerated jobs and participate fully in the development of these townships, then it'll be another case of somebody else doing it for them, and that simply won't work.
And do you think that a scare campaign would work to help do this?
Well, interestingly, the media coverage last Friday and Saturday was all about a scare campaign. The scare campaign wasn't one of my recommendations, interestingly. I did have a recommendation that we mount a massive campaign with carrots and sticks, with penalties, making it clear that it was compulsory. And as a footnote, I said, in order to give it impact, you might consider something along the lines of the AIDS publicity campaign. That was the bit that was zeroed in on. It wasn't, in fact, a recommendation, but a suggestion as to the format that a massive media campaign might take.
Indigenous Affairs Minister Malarndirri McCarthy seems to have written off your report as personal commentary. Have you found that offensive?
I did notice a comment that she thought it was inappropriate that I include personal comment, and I'll come back to that. As for having written off the report, no, I've seen no evidence of that whatsoever. In terms of personal comment, I'd have thought that if you appoint somebody like me outside the public service to bring an independent report to government, then I can't envisage such a report being devoid of personal comment. It might be like the release of a Freedom of Information paper where everything is blotted out except the address and the signature. So I can't conceive of a report from me that would be devoid of personal comment. But in terms of my appointment, I've got to say that I think it was a given that there'll be something in my various reports that will leave governments uncomfortable. It's the nature of the business. But at the outset, government would have considered that and believed the processes were robust enough to withstand such commentary by a person like me. So in my book, it's full marks to the government for having the robustness to be able to withstand comment of the type in my report.
Bob Beadman, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Laetitia.